The waiter walked right past her table, again. 3 times now, he had served water, menus, and fresh bread to tables on either side of her, but never hers. Her napkin remained untouched, her water glass empty, her presence invisible. A couple nearby chuckled quietly, not maliciously, just amused, as if they already knew what kind of story this was. A modestly dressed woman, alone, in a place that served $60 salads and judged you by your shoes before your smile. Across the restaurant, the maitre d' whispered something to the hostess, glancing her way and raising an eyebrow. A group of women in designer dresses shot her a smirk, the kind that pretends to be a smile, but cuts sharper than any insult. She simply sat there, hands folded in her lap, a quiet grace in her posture, but a growing storm behind her eyes. No one knew her name. No one knew she had a reservation made weeks in advance. No one knew she was not just a guest. She was family to the man who owned the land beneath their luxury heels. And they certainly did not know that in a few short minutes, her husband, the billionaire who built this city's skyline, would walk through the front door. And he would not just demand justice. He would buy it, outright. Her name was Elena Moreau, 32 years old, warm brown eyes, a quiet confidence honed over years of being underestimated. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood in Lyon, France, raised by her grandmother, who taught her 2 things: how to carry herself with dignity and how to never let silence make her small. Elena never wore loud labels or loud colors. She believed elegance whispered. It did not scream. So when she stepped into Maison Jules, one of the city's most exclusive modern European restaurants, she did not fit the mold. No designer handbag, no flashy diamond earrings, just a soft linen blouse, her mother's vintage scarf, and a pair of modest beige heels. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply trying to keep a promise. The reservation had been made exactly 40 days earlier. She remembered the date well, because it was the day she and her husband had celebrated their 4th wedding anniversary. He had said, "Next month, I want you to treat yourself. Go to Maison Jules. Sit by the window. Order whatever you like. I'll meet you after my flight." She had smiled. "That's not really my style." "That's the point," he had replied. "You've spent your life making everyone else comfortable. It's time someone made you feel seen." So she agreed, not because she needed the luxury, but because she appreciated the intention, and because he had chosen Maison Jules for a reason. It was the very first restaurant they had gone to after they got engaged, back when it was still a hidden gem, not yet swallowed by status-chasing celebrities and bloggers posing for likes. Now, it was nearly impossible to get a table. But for her husband had made the reservation himself, under her. So when Elena arrived, 15 minutes early as always, she was not worried. She stepped into the entryway, the glass doors hissing closed behind her, and approached the hostess with a gentle smile. "Good evening, reservation for Moreau, Elena?" The hostess, barely 20, glanced at the screen, then at Elena. Her eyes scanned Elena's outfit, then flicked to the shoes, then back to the screen. Just a moment," the hostess said, tapping unnecessarily hard on the screen. Elena waited patiently. The hostess called over the maitre d'. They whispered. The maitre d' looked up at her, blinked, whispered again. Then he approached. "I am terribly sorry, madam," he said. "We cannot seem to locate your reservation. Are you sure it was made here?" Elena's brows lifted slightly. "Yes, it was made online. My husband handled it. Elena Moreau." The maitre d' offered a thin smile that barely concealed skepticism. "Of course. Perhaps you meant our sister restaurant downtown. Maison Jean?" "No," she said calmly. "It was here, by the window, 7 p.m. A pause. "Well," he said at last, "we may have a table in the back, near the kitchen." It was not a suggestion. It was a polite dismissal. Elena looked past him. The window tables were still mostly empty, several marked with reserved, but clearly not for her. Still, she nodded. "That's fine." She was seated, alone, at the back table near the swinging door to the kitchen. The scent of garlic and steam occasionally burst through. A server brought a glass of water and a basket of bread, then vanished. Minutes passed. Other guests were welcomed with warm handshakes and compliments. Fresh flowers appeared at their tables. Menus were placed like invitations. Elena sat without a menu, without a second glance, invisible in a dress code she had unintentionally broken. But what the staff did not know, what the patrons did not see, was that her last name, Moreau, had once made headlines, not because of her, but because of the man she had married. Julien Moreau was a man who rarely gave interviews, but his name was on the foundation stones of nearly every high-rise in the city. He owned the largest private real estate firm in the region. He did not flaunt his wealth, but when he made a move, the market listened. And yet, most people had no idea what his wife looked like. Elena had intentionally kept it that way. She preferred it. She had told Julien early in their marriage, "I do not want to be introduced as your wife. I want to be introduced as myself. Let people treat me how they truly see me. Then let them learn." He had nodded with quiet pride. Then let's make space for them to learn. Now, as Elena, because she knew something no one else in the room knew, her husband's plane had landed 30 minutes ago, and Julien never arrived empty-handed. The door chimed softly. It was not loud, just a polite, digital sound triggered by the restaurant's automatic entrance sensor, but it was enough. Heads turned, because the man who stepped inside did not need to announce himself. He carried no entourage, wore no flashy logo, just a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit. Crisp, effortless. A silver watch glinted under his cuff, and his shoes, polished but worn in, struck the marble floor with a measured calm that made time feel slower. Julien Moreau had arrived. The hostess blinked as he approached. She knew who he was immediately. Everyone in the city's hospitality scene did. The man whose firm had designed the skyline. The man who funded eco-housing for low-income families and still drove his father's vintage BMW on Sundays. "Good evening," Julien said, his voice warm, clear, and direct. "I believe my wife was seated earlier. Elena Moreau. Reservation under her name." The hostess paled. Panic washed over her features like a tide. Not theatrical, but real. Yes, of course, Mr. Moreau. She is in the back, right this way." But he did not follow. He glanced toward the main dining room, noting the lavish decor, the laughter, the fine wine being poured at the window tables. Then he looked past it, toward the rear, and he saw her, sitting alone, still, waiting. A soft smile touched the corner of his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. Instead, he turned back to the hostess. "Tell your manager," he said gently, "to meet me at the table. Now." The entire room adjusted itself. Suddenly the waitstaff, who had been so confident in their selective hospitality, began whispering to each other. The sommelier's face turned ghostly white. A waiter with tattoos down one arm nearly dropped a tray of oysters as he registered the man standing near the door. The maitre d', now visibly sweating, emerged from the shadows and rushed forward. "Mr. Moreau, please, allow us to move your party to a more appropriate table." Julien raised a brow. Appropriate for whom? A pause. The maitre d' opened his mouth, then closed it again. Julien did not wait for a reply. He walked, steady and unbothered, across the restaurant toward Elena's table. As he neared, Elena finally looked up from her untouched water glass. There was no surprise in her eyes, just calm recognition. And something else, something only he would have noticed. Relief. He reached the table and leaned down slightly, kissing her softly on the cheek. "Sorry I'm late," he whispered. "You're right on time," she replied. "Mr. Moreau, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding," he began. Julien interrupted with a single raised hand. "No need for apologies," he said. "It's quite clear how your staff handles guests who do not meet your visual criteria." The manager's eyes widened. "Sir, I assure you—" "Save it," Julien said, voice still calm but edged now with ice. "Instead, bring your owner to this table. I believe we have a business matter to discuss." The manager froze. "The owner? He's out of town." Julien nodded slowly. "Then call him, now. I'll wait." The words were not loud, but every table nearby fell into silence. Even the clink of cutlery stopped. Julien turned back to Elena. "Still want to eat here?" he asked. Elena gave a half-smile. "I'm not sure they have anything that pairs well with condescension." He chuckled softly. "Fair, but I believe we can fix that." 15 minutes later, after whispered phone calls, frantic pacing, and multiple attempted apologies, the restaurant's co-owner appeared via video call. Projected onto the maitre d's iPad, his image flickered slightly under the poor signal. "Mr. Moreau, what a surprise." Julien leaned slightly forward, hands folded. "Maison Jules sits on land my company owns. My wife was disrespected here tonight, so here's what we'll do. I will purchase this establishment by the end of the week. The offer will be fair. Market value plus 10% goodwill." The owner blinked. "That's generous." "It's strategic," Julien said. "And as of this moment, the new management policy begins. Starting now." He stood up, looked around the room, and said in a voice that carried every corner of the restaurant, "Every guest is now to be treated with dignity, regardless of their clothing, their accent, their shoes, their name. Every staff member who failed to do that tonight is dismissed, effective immediately." A gasp echoed. The hostess backed away. The waiter with the tattooed arm set down his tray and disappeared into the kitchen. The maitre d' stood frozen. Elena looked up at her husband. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "No," he agreed, "but someone should have." Julien reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. He handed it to Elena. Inside was a handwritten note. "To the woman who sees the soul of things, not the price tag. You were never invisible. They just were not worthy of seeing you." The restaurant had never been quieter. It was not the kind of silence that settled softly. It was the kind that drops, heavy and sudden, like the moment before thunder. People who had watched Elena walk in without a second glance now stared at her, wide-eyed, half-ashamed, half-awed. Some straightened in their seats, pretending they had never judged her. Others lowered their eyes, remembering how they had scoffed at her table placement, her shoes, her scarf. And somewhere in the corner, the hostess who had ignored Elena entirely now stood pale and stunned. Her professional smile had vanished. Her hands were trembling behind her back. Julien remained standing, his arm lightly resting on the back of Elena's chair. He was not speaking anymore. He did not need to. His presence had done what no policy ever could. It had restructured the room without lifting a voice. The manager opened his mouth as if to say something, but quickly closed it again, nodding awkwardly instead. He stepped back, surrendering the floor not just to Julien but to the reality that things would never return to what they were 10 minutes ago. Elena, meanwhile, had not moved. She sat still, gracefully upright, hands folded in her lap. She had spent a lifetime being overlooked, and she had learned something along the way. Power was not always about control. Sometimes power was the ability to sit still in the storm and let others be exposed by their own actions. She looked around now, at the same faces who had watched her like she did not belong, and her gaze was calm, not smug, not vengeful, just knowing. A server approached, nervous and flushed. He set down 2 menus, stuttering slightly. "Madame, monsieur, would you like to order now?" Julien sat back down, looked at Elena, then nodded. "Whatever she wants," he said softly. The server gulped and disappeared again. People began whispering, not mocking whispers anymore, whispers laced with guilt and curiosity. The woman at the table near the window, who earlier had chuckled when the maitre d' questioned Elena's reservation, now leaned toward her date and whispered, "Do you think she'll take legal action?" A man with slicked-back hair, still holding his untouched cocktail, muttered under his breath, "I didn't even realize that was her. She looks so ordinary." His date elbowed him. "She looks like someone who knows her worth. Maybe that's what makes you uncomfortable." Then something unexpected happened. An older woman, maybe in her late 60s, dressed in a deep emerald shawl, stood up and walked over to Elena's table. She paused, hands clasped in front of her, and said, "Madame Moreau, I owe you an apology. I watched it all. I said nothing. That was cowardice." Elena looked up. The woman's voice trembled slightly, but she held Elena's gaze. "I was once treated like that, years ago, and I promised myself I would never let someone else go through it in front of me. I broke that promise tonight." Julien tilted his head respectfully. Elena gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." The woman bowed slightly, then returned to her table. But her act had broken the dam. Others followed. Some came to apologize. Some came to express admiration. Some just wanted to be seen with her. The woman who... As their food arrived, an artful arrangement of truffle, risotto, and braised duck, the mood in the restaurant had shifted entirely. It was not about the food anymore. It was about what had happened. How a room full of people had watched a woman be dismissed, and then witnessed the balance of power flip without a single shout. One of the restaurant's co-managers, red-faced and flustered, approached Julien with a form. "Mr. Moreau, if you'd like to begin discussing acquisition paperwork." Julien waved it away. "Later. I'm having dinner with my wife." The man nodded furiously and backed away. Then Julien did something he rarely did in public. He pulled out his phone and tapped record. "To everyone who's ever been overlooked," he said softly into the camera, "you don't need to raise your voice to change a room. You just need to know your worth and refuse to apologize for it." He turned the camera toward Elena. "To my wife, the most powerful person I know, this is your moment." Elena's smile was small but sincere. She did not speak. She did not need to. The moment belonged to her already. The clinking of cutlery faded into the background. For Elena, the present had softened, and her mind had gently drifted backward, back to a different table, a smaller one, in the cramped break room of a bookstore where she once worked full-time. She had been 19, new to the city, juggling studies and bills, and wearing the same coat through all 4 seasons. Customers had often mistaken her for a cleaner. Managers had often forgotten to include her in team meetings. She was not bitter about it. It had taught her something most people took a lifetime to learn. Some people only see the world through price tags and pedigrees. But the ones who matter, they see substance, not surface. Back then, Elena had found comfort in quiet places. Library aisles, secondhand shops, a little cafe that let her sit for hours with one tea. She had never craved the spotlight. Not because she feared it, but because she had learned that her light did not need validation to shine. That same belief was what kept her calm tonight. That was why she had said nothing when the hostess ignored her, why she had smiled instead of snapped, why she had let the mockery roll off her like rain on glass. She had been here before, just not in heels and a silk scarf. Years later, even after marrying Julien, after the ceremonies, the headlines, the photo shoots for high-profile magazines, she still kept her name at times. Elena Thomas. Not because she was hiding, but because she wanted to remember the version of herself who had walked every hard. A man with messy hair, glasses slipping down his nose, and a frantic expression as he looked for a rare architecture volume that was out of print. She had found it in 5 minutes, but she had made him wait 10, just so she could see if he would say, please. He had, twice, and when she finally handed it to him, he had looked at her like she had handed him a treasure chest, not just because of the book, but because of her. They had coffee 2 days later, not at a high-end place, just a bench outside the bookstore, sharing a croissant and talking about childhood dreams. It was there, over sips of too strong espresso, that she realized he was not like the rest. He listened more than he spoke. He asked her about her favorite smell growing up. He did not flinch when she told him she once cried over a customer throwing a book in the trash. He had said, "The world needs more people like you, Elena. People who still feel." And she had laughed because no one had ever made her feel so visible. That feeling, of being seen, had shaped everything that followed. Even when he became the billionaire, even when their lives became a blur of meetings, investments, red carpet events, Julien had always grounded her. He had reminded her that her kindness was not weakness, that her empathy was not a liability, that the girl from the bookstore deserved every seat at every table. Even tonight, as she sat at the table, watching the ripple of reactions in the restaurant, Elena thought about why she had not spoken up earlier, why she had not demanded better treatment the second she arrived. The answer was simple, because she was tired of fighting for acknowledgement in every room. Sometimes, silence was not surrender. Sometimes, silence was a test of them, not of her, and they had failed. Now, as the room quietly restructured itself around her presence, she could feel the shift in energy. Not in a performative way, Not the kind of attention that comes with viral videos or pity, but a real shift. She had become a mirror. She showed them who they were when they thought no one important was watching. And now, they were seeing themselves clearly for the first time. Julien reached across the table, gently tapping her wrist. "Where did you just go?" he asked, half teasing. Elena smiled. "To the past," she said softly, "to remember why I never wanted to be treated like I didn't belong." He nodded, understanding. "You never have to explain, but I love when you do." They both laughed, not loudly, not to prove anything, just together. In that moment, Elena did not feel victorious. She did not feel vindicated. She felt whole, because the little girl who once stayed behind after class to clean erasers, the teenager who worked late shifts to afford tuition, the woman who sat alone in a luxury restaurant, dismissed and invisible, they were all here, and they were all proud. The next morning, headlines across social media and local news carried one story. No fuss, no press. He simply looked at the manager, the same man who had ignored Elena's reservation, and said, "You'll receive an email in the morning. I'm placing the brand under new leadership." The manager nodded, visibly shaken. "Of course, Mr. Moreau, anything you say." Julien had replied gently, "No, not what I say. What Elena believes in. That will be our new standard." The next day, a video was posted to the restaurant's website. It was short. No music, no edits. Just Elena, seated at a sunlit table, speaking directly into the camera. "This restaurant will remain open, but not as a place where people are judged by what they wear or who they know. It will be known for service that begins with respect, for food that nourishes more than the body, for spaces where people can be seen, truly seen, for who they are. To those who overlooked me, thank you. You reminded me how far I've come, and how much further we still need to go. To those watching, never let someone else's assumptions write your story." Within hours, the video had been shared thousands of times. Comments flooded in. "This woman has more class than the entire industry combined. Elegance is when you're mistreated, and still choose grace. New dream, to be like Elena, quiet, powerful, unforgettable." A week later, Elena returned to the restaurant, now under its new name, Maison Vraie, the true house. She wore the same scarf, the same shoes, because she did not need to dress differently to be respected. The difference now? The culture had changed. From the valet to the kitchen staff, everyone had been through training rooted in kindness, dignity, and awareness. Not because of rules, because of her example. At the soft reopening, a young waitress nervously approached Elena's table. "Madame Moreau," she began, "may I serve your table tonight?" Elena smiled. "Only if you call me Elena." The waitress blinked, surprised, then smiled back. "Elena it is." At the end of the night, Elena and Julien stepped out onto the quiet street. The air was crisp. The stars above glimmered like city lights at rest. Julien took her hand. "Do you realize what you did?" he asked. "I ate dinner," she teased. "You did more than that," he replied. "You changed something, without yelling, without demanding, just by being." Elena looked up at the sky. "Maybe we all have a moment," she said softly. "A moment when the world pushes, and we either disappear or we choose to become visible." Julien nodded. "And you, my love, you became unforgettable." How often do we judge others based on surface, their clothes, their manner, their quiet? This story is not just about what will I choose to become in that moment. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below. Tell us, have you ever been misjudged or underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong without saying a word? Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Let's remind the world that dignity, respect, and quiet power are never out of fashion. Until next time.